Good morning everyone, and welcome to our backyard. In today's video, I'd like to give an update on our shade garden. Down here in Texas along the Gulf Coast, I garden for butterflies and hummingbirds in Zone 9. My name is Crystal, and I'm really glad that you've joined me today. This is the vantage point that I see when I look from my kitchen window or my patio. And one of the things that I really wanted to achieve, or I want to achieve with my shade garden, is I want it to be pollinator friendly, and I also want it to have drama and big bold color. And that necessarily doesn't have to be through blooms, because what I have found down here in the hot and humid weather with heavy clay soil and lots of rain, typically, it can be a real challenge for a lot of plants to thrive in shadier conditions. And so when you find a combination that works, and then you find combinations that have lots of different color choices, it really brings to life the shade garden. So let me get in a little bit closer. And what does so well for us here in the South are Coleus and Caladiums in the shade garden. I've mentioned this before. You can really find so many different gorgeous colors like they have in a traditional plant that you would think of, like heuchera, which are coral bells, or hostas. And heucheras and coral bells, heucheras and hostas typically are perennials. Coleus are not. They cannot take the cold. And so for us, we need to purchase them each year or take cuttings so we have them for the next year. What I did this year, and I shared with you, is I was able to get these plants as little tiny nursery plants for $1.99 at my favorite nursery. And then I ordered online from Proven Winners and also from Rosie Dawn Gardens. I ordered specific colorful Coleus, and so there are a lot of different options. I've not taken cuttings because I can so easily readily get inexpensive Coleus with gorgeous color that I haven't taken cuttings yet, but I might be doing that this year because I have a lot of different types that I really have enjoyed. So you heard me mention that I am a pollinator gardener, specifically for butterflies and hummingbirds. And you might think, well, these plants don't flower. They do. Typically what you'll hear is, the conventional wisdom is, don't let your Coleus flower because then they get leggy and they don't have the gorgeous foliage, which is true. But I tell you, the pollinators absolutely go nuts over Coleus flowers. So I will pinch my flowers back until probably about August, and then I do let them flower, and they flower for a very long time. The other thing is, you don't typically think of Caladiums as flowering, but they do. And my Caladiums are just starting to flower. They don't flower very long, and so I don't really consider them to flower. But pollinators absolutely love Caladium flowers also. And so my Caladiums are just getting started and just getting ready to flower. They don't last long. And so for me, they're not real major pollinator attractors. So what I want to achieve in this garden is drama and color. And I have greens, and then the burgundies, and the chartreuse, and then pops of pink throughout this bed. And it really is pretty dramatic, no matter what angle that you look at it from. And so I really enjoy this bed more than I thought I ever would, now that I can grow things gorgeously in this area that will pop for color, that draw in the pollinators, and just is super pleasing to the eye. I also plant in ground, and I plant in containers. And over here, planting in containers isn't for any type of drainage issue. It's really just to give height, and it is to then stand out amongst what's planted in the ground. So there's a few things that I want to share with you about the plants in this garden. First, the deep burgundy or deep red, accented with a chartreuse color, highlighted by green, beautiful green in the background, really makes this area pop. It draws the eye. So one thing I want to mention about this burgundy color is with Coleus, it can be hard to get a plant that stays true to color. I've had a couple now that will revert back to their parents, and I really like this burgundy, and I want to keep it that way. And what I have found is this Main Street, Beale Street. Let me bring up so it's the Main Street series, and this Coleus is called Beale Street. This Coleus is an AAS winner, an All-American Selections winner, the only Coleus to get that distinction. And it retains its color probably the best out of these deep burgundies of any of them. And so far I have seen that. And so I'm really super pleased with Beale Street. Last year I had one called Ruby Slipper, and it was even more vibrant, but it completely reverted back to the parent colors of pretty dramatic and a lot of green edging around. And so it was no longer this burgundy beautiful color, and it reverted back very quickly, which, you know, I still liked it, but I was pretty disappointed. And so I did want to point that out to you if you are interested in the dark deep burgundy color. This Beale Street really retains, so far for me, and what the documentation has showed, it has really retained its color nicely. Then this chartreuse color, this was a favorite of mine last year, and I really enjoyed this particular plant because it didn't get too large, and I love the variegation. So when I'm looking at it from afar, it's a chartreuse color, but when you get up close, you can observe the gold, kind of yellow, and the green. And this variety is called Riverwalk. It's supposed to get 12 to 24 inches, and it easily got 24 inches for me last year. And so I have this as a drift amongst Beale Street, which is this burgundy color. And I really like the look of that. I think it adds just pops of color, and it really draws my eye when I'm looking from the kitchen window, and also really anywhere in the yard. The other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to achieve some host plants here and some nectar plants. And so I've done that by bookending with a butterfly host plant on this end with my white-veined Dutchman's pipevine. And the white vein Dutchman's pipevine is Aristolochia fimbriata. It is a ground cover. It's in pretty much shady conditions. It does get bright indirect sun. And it's the host plant for the pipevine swallowtail. So I have a host plant, actually two of them on this side. This plant is a climber, and it is called, bring up its tag, the woolly Dutchman's pipevine, which is Aristolochia tomentosa. And this plant doesn't love its life for me. It is a host plant for the same butterfly, and it is a native Texan, but its hardiness zone is just 5 through 8. And so what I've noticed is it absolutely suffers in our really hot summer heat. So it is growing up into my red tip tree. So on this end I have a host plant, and then on this end I have nectar plants, and those are gorgeous. And I'm going to get a little bit closer. Those are shrimp plants. These shrimp plants are heavy bloomers, and the shrimp colored bract gives way to the really delicate flower underneath, which are visited by hummingbirds and some larger butterflies. It's a really fascinating flower to me. But it goes into it, the color scheme goes very well into and blends in really well into this shade bed landscape. So that is a nectar plant. Eventually all the Coleus will be nectar plants, and some of the Caladiums will be will bloom for a short period of time. And then in the back I have what are growing incredibly well are my salvia, and these are a unique salvia. Very few salvia want to be in the shade, and these do. I thought I've pulled the tag for salvia, my Salvia Madrensis, but I didn't. I'm going to go in the back. So I am in the back by my fence, and as you can see, this salvia is loving its life here, and it has multiplied, which I absolutely love. And this plant in the fall, starting about October for me, will bloom a beautiful buttery yellow, long 2-foot long bract like salvias do, or a calyx. These leaves provide a lot of drama, just the texture and the color in the back of this shade garden. And so I had a little bit of a time getting this started because I did lose a few plants during the first freeze that we had, but now I've learned to protect the bases of them with leaves for any freezing events that we have in the future, and they have come back beautifully for me. So much so that I'm probably going to have to start pulling them because I don't want them to take over this bed. And then I also have, which I'm going to have to remove from back here because you can't see them, but I have some Coleus that I specifically ordered, a couple of trailing Coleuses and some that are going to provide some really nice color. So I will be moving those out from the back here and more into this little area to get a little bit more visibility. So I'm still in the back here, and as I scan, you can see the pops of color. from the foliage. And the differing plant heights and textures themselves. I do have tucked back here a couple of plants that I started from seed. And these are my Turk's cap. So we'll see how they do in shadier conditions. And this is my newest caladium called Bottle Rocket from the Heart to Heart series from Proven Winners. I really like how this looks, and I like the drama it's providing. Oh, it's getting ready to flower here too. That it provides in the back. So I'm going to go back in the front. So when I look at the side of my ground cover, it's starting to get eaten again. So this will be, I had it completely eaten to the ground with caterpillars, and you can see I've got more caterpillars here. That's just fantastic. So this will get eaten to the ground numerous times during the season, which I love, and it's a quick grower, so it grows back very quickly. But I have grown in this space multiple different types of plants. Impatiens grow well, begonias grow well in our conditions down here. But plants that typically do well in shade in other parts of the country do not, and have not successfully thrived for me. And so finding these for this southern garden that is hot and humid, heavy clay soil, and just can get lots of rain. You know, we had tons of rain in this recent storm from the Houston area. And it's really hard to find plants, shade plants in particular, that do well. So if you're wanting more flowers and showy plants, you know, impatiens I mentioned do well, and certainly shade begonias do well down here. What are some other flowering plants that you find do really well in the shade along the Gulf Coast? For me, you know that I garden for pollinators, hummingbirds, butterflies, and native bees. And in particular, I'm looking for plants that play well with that group. And so I've kind of given up on the begonias because they're not a great flower and nectar producer, although they're gorgeous. And I've also given up on impatiens also. So I don't know, I might go back at some point, but for now, for the drama, the color, what I can achieve in a shade garden that just flourishes and does well, I think I've hit upon what's done well in this spot for our conditions. So what do you think? Do you plant Coleus and Caladiums in your shade gardens down here in the south? You know, Coleus can be planted really anywhere and do very well. Caladiums do thrive on the heat and humidity, so I know in some areas in the United States they don't thrive and do well. But I can't tell you how many different coral bells or heuchera I've tried to grow, and they just don't thrive for me in this space. So I wanted to show you what my shade garden looks like. It's growing very beautifully at the moment, and so I wanted to capture that. I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to put up at the top, when I first planted this out, and you can see how tiny and little the plants were that I got as $1.99 bedding plants. And I mentioned that you would not be able to see the ground in between them. And that is the case. They just grow lush and gorgeous. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you again soon.